Well, welcome to Oaktree, and this is part one of our series looking at the life of Joseph in the Bible. And it's this start of the story in Joseph that really raises the questions. The quest begins with questions. There are questions right there from the brothers and from Joseph's father, Jacob. But there are bigger questions when you think about the whole book of Genesis: creation, fall, and then promise to the descendants of Abraham. But it raises questions for us too. We ask our own questions from that passage we've just heard. And if you want to take the time to go back and read through Genesis chapter 37 for yourself, please do so. Well, I have so many questions for 17-year-old Joseph. For a start, I want to know if he had a better job than me at 17. I worked at Red Rooster when I was 17, and I want to know if tending sheep with your brothers is worse than working in a fast food chicken shop. I think tending sheep would be the quiet and peaceful life, don't you? It's just out in the fields, the sheep are eating grass. I think he was probably just sitting around most of the day doing nothing. Well, working in fast food is exactly that. It's fast. The orders come up on the screen and you have to get them out faster than they're coming in. Making a chicken burger or a wrap or cutting a whole chook into sixteenths. I mean, we used to discuss chicken cutting technique. Do you start at the back or the front? We even used to try and make cuts whilst flipping the chickens. So the chicken's in the air, try and cut it just to speed things up. And we'd even race each other, and we were pretty fast. When the orders were quiet outside of lunch rush and dinner rush, we had to clean out and stuff as many chickens as we could in preparation for the next rush. I don't want to know how many hours of my life have been spent with my hands inside a chicken cavity. So Joseph, in all fairness, I hope you had to fend off some wild animals like King David did when he was a shepherd boy. I hope you did your fair share of hard work. And when it says there at the start of our passage, when it says Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. I hope that means, Joseph, that you were working hard with your hands dirty, and when you brought a bad report to your father about your brothers, I hope it was out of genuine concern for their work ethic. Now, it actually doesn't say why exactly, so even there is a question about why he brought that bad report. I mean, siblings dob each other in all the time. But this occasion signals something dangerous. When you're 17 years old and you have older brothers and a younger one as well, this is not playful rivalry and going to the parent as a referee. 17-year-olds know how to do things that have a lifelong impact. Whether Joseph knew the consequences of this or not, he was behaving in a way that would shape his future. Being 17 is not an inconsequential age. There's no time in life that is a safe playground that has no effect down the track. Joseph's father, Jacob, who was renamed Israel, he knew that more than anyone. He knew the story that he wrestled with his twin brother in the womb. And that competition, that wrestle for blessing ended up tearing them apart. And so God's blessing comes down Jacob, or Israel's line, as the lone wolf. And now we're hearing that one of Jacob's sons, Joseph, is going to his father against his brothers. And if we're reading steadily through Genesis, what are we to think? We think, oh no, here we go again. More brothers who can't get along. One of my questions for Jesus, and I have many questions, I'm not a finished product, and I hope you don't see yourselves as finished products. One of my questions for Jesus is, what is the deal with testosterone? What does a redeemed, godly, sanctified human look like when testosterone seems to be a normal part of our bodies? There are levels of testosterone in all humans, but in men, the levels are much higher. I'm sure there's someone who can give me the exact stats. But testosterone comes with certain characteristics. It's one of the things that is monitored for drug cheats in sporting competition. It increases strength, power, and the physical ability to fight and win. Now, Jesus doesn't say, love your neighbors. He says, love your enemies. I mean, he does say love your neighbors, but he goes beyond that and he says, love your enemies. So that raises a question for me about a sanctified expression of testosterone that I'm on a journey for. Very happy to crowdsource ideas on that if you have any. Of course, division isn't only for men. Women are capable of disharmony too. It probably doesn't help when Jacob has 2 wives and a couple of concubines producing children for him. It's not exactly the most harmonious of settings to all get along. But men and women are broken, and we don't all live in unity and equity, and we certainly don't honour and serve and build each other up as we should. We fail in our absence of love. And if we thought this story is just history repeating itself, then it continues on. It says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. That is a recipe for disaster, really. And, I have more questions there. I want to know how Joseph ended up as the golden child. I mean, what was the secret sauce that he found that gave him a head start on all his other siblings? Why does he get to be the favored one? I grew up in a family where there were no favorites. My family, in a way, was the opposite of Joseph's family in this regard. I think my mum particularly was so adamant about not having favorites. Everyone is honoured and equal. A big part of that was she was the youngest set of twins out of 8 children. Being a twin, she's Miriam and her sister is Marion. They were always dressed in matching clothes, given the same toys. I mean, that's just what you do with twins, right? But she ended up with a very clear concern that everyone is an individual and treated with their own unique expression. So then with us kids, we were all given our individuality and no one was the favourite. That is not true in every family. What about your family? Were there favourites in your family? If you were an only child, it's pretty easy to be the favourite, I guess. You get to be the unchallenged favourite. But if you have siblings, there's always some sort of difference in how you function. In my family now, I have a favourite. My oldest is my favourite boy. My middle child is my favourite oldest girl, and my youngest is my favourite youngest girl. Israel, or Jacob, also had a favourite wife, it says, and I have a favourite wife. Her name is Erin. She is my only wife. All jokes aside, family dynamics are real. And so Joseph ends up with a special coat. In some translations, it says it was a robe of many colours, what we might think of as Joseph's technicolored dream coat. But this could just be a coat with long sleeves. It might not have been colourful at all. It might have just been plain brown. There's actually a question there that scholars have spent a lot of their time on trying to answer in a very niche kind of academic way, somewhere between fashion and archaeology and textual criticism, trying to figure out what exactly was this coat. So there's a question there. We don't know the answer to it, but we do know the relevant thing for the story, in that it was special. There was something recognizably significant about it, and he got it because his dad loved him more than the other brothers, and it was visible. It says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Love is visible. When a dad loves a son and gives him a gift, it is visible. Other people see it. The difficult and complicated thing is that when love is visible, we make comparisons. Maybe Jacob's behavior here is highly questionable then. He's exacerbated a rift between his sons. Perhaps we should say he's even caused it because he's honoured and loved Joseph more than them. And then he's created this physical object to be a sign to everyone of the love that Joseph gets and no one else does. Jacob is a man of favourites, but he does it in a way that actually excludes others. If I can just short circuit centuries of time, when God the Father shows love, when he demonstrates love, when he gives out a special coat, if you like, what does that look like? Well, we know that for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever should believe in him, whoever. You know, the response to that love is secondary. What we do to God's love, with God's love, is a secondary matter. The primary thing is that God's love is for everyone, the whole world. He gave a gift for everyone. Well, unlike God, Jacob limits his love. The brothers hated Joseph and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph becomes the object of love and the object of hate at the same time. And it gets worse. It says, then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. It is so hard to read that without asking a few questions like, Joseph, what are you doing? Why would you think it's a good idea to tell your brothers that their stuff is going to bow down to your stuff? Does he not realize that they hate him? Maybe Joseph just has zero emotional intelligence. Maybe he's just super competitive. He just has the big vision drive to win. He's so confident in the dream that it doesn't matter if he keeps quiet or if he blurts it out to everyone. So many questions. And naturally, the brothers have questions too. They say, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. And so it's really quite extraordinary then that he has another dream. This time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. So the dream has grown and gained clarity. It's not just sheaves bowing down to sheaves. It's not just the brothers. Now it's Joseph's mother and father and brothers bowing down to him. There's no mystery or ambiguity here. It's not complicated to interpret this dream. And yet there are still so many questions. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, with his own question, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" So if anything, the repeated theme through this part of the passage is asking sharp questions. Ask sharp questions. You know, this is a great story. The Joseph narrative is just wonderful storytelling. I have no doubt in my mind that this is a true story, that Joseph was a real man. He had a bunch of brothers who didn't like him, that there was a famine in the land, and God works for good even when human intentions are evil. But it's a magnificent story that it raises so many questions. And this raising of questions and sparking our curiosity brings us into captive attention for how the story will unfold. And the passage here ends with a gripping exit so that we're left hanging, ready to hear more. It says, "His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind." Verse 11 there would actually indicate that Joseph is sincere and they all take the dream seriously. And if you know the story, well, I won't spoil the ending for you. But we shouldn't take away from this passage a message of boast about your dreams. Because his brothers hate him for it, and his father rebukes him, even if he takes a mental note of it. We'll see next week exactly what the brothers do to Joseph in their anger. But it raises a really good question, just as a good story should do. Perhaps the biggest and best question it raises is, where is God in all this? We want God in the foreground. And it's hard to listen and to watch and to experience for ourselves those times, those moments when the story has him in the background. How often do we feel like we're in chapter 37 and then it gets worse in chapter 38? God, why are you in the background for pretty much all of chapter 39? And then we have to wait until the end of chapter 39 when we finally see your hand at work in the foreground. Why do we have to wait to see your touch of blessing breaking through the chaos and the difficulty, and to see your goodness overcoming the broken mess of human desire? When God is not in the foreground, when God is not named as explicitly making something happen, when it is only flawed humans in the foreground, then at the very least we should be very hesitant to take moral lessons from the characters. what you should look out for over the next few weeks as we're digesting this story about things going from bad to worse, and as our story often goes from bad to worse. Look out for those key phrases. There might be a whole lot of mess. It might be a large volume of murky water. But take note of those key phrases when God is explicitly mentioned. Keep watch for those moments when silliness turns into salvation, when hatred turns into honor, anger turns to awe, division turns to devotion. And we see some of this here at the start of the long narrative about Joseph. It's all hatred and anger and division. The tribe is turning into tribes. But God is up to something. There is a bigger picture in mind. The story gets worse before it gets better because there are massive problems that need to be overcome. Huge barriers that God is taking his people through. We even see hints of salvation. Later in chapter 37, we hear about Reuben working to turn things for good. There are hints that salvation is in store. So keep watch for those. And this is exactly what his father does do. His father kept the matter in mind. Now you might remember that Mary, the mother of Jesus, did exactly the same thing. All these extraordinary things happen at the time of the birth of Jesus. And it says Mary kept all these things in her heart. She treasured these things in her heart. And sometimes all you can do, all you have, is to hold on and to wait, to hope, and to look forward to the day of salvation. Sometimes all you can do is treasure in your heart for the right time to come. So friends, may you have eyes to see God's bigger picture. And may you bring your questions, your real and genuine questions, your good questions that get raised in our messy stories and in the messy stories of the Bible. May you bring those questions to Jesus that he might answer them by his word. So Lord, help us to treasure your good things in our hearts. Amen.